Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of the series, How to Create Loops for Worship. Today on part 2 we're going to be talking about
sound design.
What are we going to talk about in sound design? Well, we're going to use different effects like compression, EQ,
reverb,
delay. We're going to just have some fun. Hopefully I can teach you a few new tricks. Now, this is just my personal workflow on how I create different textures and techniques. Today we're going to just create a worship pad out of a piano using some compression, EQ, some filtering, maybe a little bit of reverb and delay, and kind of see what happens. And of course the techniques I'm going to show you today, you can kind of apply it to multiple types of instruments and just develop your mix. Anyways, let's dig into part 2 of sound design. Just feel free to comment inside the comment sections, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you have. Now this is just kind of all my personal workflow on how I create worship loops. There's 100 different ways to do this stuff. Just find what works for you. Feel free to use any of the techniques I use and apply your own. Now I am trying to use, mouse clicks to show, that way you can kind of see everything. There's tons of keyboard shortcuts that you can use instead of clicking around. And of course, there's tons of different MIDI controllers out there as well, to where you can assign knobs and presets, and get a good, if you don't have a good MIDI controller, get you one and learn how to work your knobs. I'm not going to talk about MIDI controllers today or talk about how to assign knobs. There's tons of videos on YouTube for Logic on how to do that. But today just going to kind of talk about sound design, show you a few little tricks. So what we want to do next, if you listen to the track, you'll hear a pad kind of come in. You can kind of just hear that kind of sounds like a string pad in the background that sets up under the guitar, and you can hear it kind of swell in and get louder.
Verse 2, 3, 4,
and that's what we're going to create first. What that does, that pad, it's kind of layered up under this whole song. So let's start by adding a instrument. So we're going to click on the plus, going to click on software instrument, create. So that gives us our new instrument track. Then let's just load up an ES1 synthesizer. It's just a basic synth. We can load it in stereo, and I'll drag it over here to you. Now if you come to the defaults and just load up, you got some pads here you can kind of click through. I always start with just a preset, save time. That kind of sounded more stringy, a little almost like a stringed instrument or something. So I'm just going to find a string. We'll just say warm synth string. That kind of fits the profile, what we're looking for. So let's just click on it, and that has some of the elements we're looking for to kind of start with. When I'm surfing around looking for different instruments, going through presets, you're not going to find the exact preset of what you're wanting, but listen to certain elements. There may just be a few elements in the sound that work, and then we're going to use the other effects like filters and or EQ as a filter, and compressors and reverb to hone that particular sound in. So we got our pad, or our string pads, whatever you want to call it. Now what we're going to do is double click on EQ, and let's just drag our EQ over here, and we're going to use this as a filtering control. Now I have a MIDI keyboard hooked up. I'm using a Novation 25 SL MK2, just a small little 25 key keyboard. I just kind of keep it right in front of my computer screen. But what it does, it has a cool feature on it called auto map that comes with most of all the Novation keyboards, and the auto map syncs up flawlessly with Logic Pro. So if you're looking for a good MIDI controller for Logic Pro, look into the Novations, especially the MK2s. They're great. You don't have to do a whole lot of MIDI mapping. You know, the auto maps it for you. But anyways, on my MIDI controller, I have it to where I can control these different filter cutoffs. Going to turn on the low cut filter. Also going to turn on the high pass, low pass. Get both of them going, and I can turn my MIDI knob on my MIDI keyboard, and it controls basically the same thing as grabbing this and moving it up and down. Basically, what I want to do is I want to cut this thing off. You can see how when you filter it, when you run that sweep on it, it changes your pad sound. Now also I want to come and grab my high pass filter and cut the highs. Now you see how we're instead of working our volume control, instead of coming over here doing an automation on our volume control, what we're going to do is automate our filters. So when I hold that note, so that guitar track comes in, our pad's sitting there. See how we can swell it in. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give this a little bit more of a trail. So there we go. That's kind of how you use filtering to control your instrument tracks. And what you want to do, you want to use filters, I mean, almost on every instrument you load in, whether it be a guitar track, drums, or anything like that. You want to use your high pass and low pass, especially this end of the spectrum, your lower part. You know, you don't want all your stuff just over here going off the deep end, because there would be some really low sub bass stuff that you might not be able to hear, but your speakers are feeling it. They'll just be jumping out of the box. You don't want your speaker moving a whole lot. So you use your filters to catch some of that stuff and really clean up your mix. So, you know, I can sit right here and just change the intensity and automation of that thing. Just by using my filters. So let's get close to where that filter kind of starts. Somewhere up in there. Okay, but it sounds kind of dry. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a compressor. So click on Dynamics. Let's just load up the factory compressor. Let's drag this thing in over here. And on compression, especially with your pads and strings, give it all you can give it. And let's turn the ratio up. Let's say 4:1. Sounds like a good starting point. Now what we did, we added some sustain. It just kind of really makes our pad just really stand out. Now let's come back to our filter and play with that filter sweep again. Hear that compressor working? It's almost going like a woo boom, woo boom, woo boom, woo boom, woo boom. Now let's make this thing bigger, so let's add some reverb. Grab a reverb. Let's just grab a verb. Let's see what reverb that is. I think it's just going to be basic. I try to stay away from the, Colvation reverbs, like the, let's see, what was that? The reverb a lot of people use. It's the Space Designer. I stay away from a lot of them. They just suck up too much processor power. You can do a lot with just these basic reverbs. So let's just turn the mix all the way up. Let's give this room a big room. Let's give some reflectivity there. Maybe give a little bit more pre-delay. Now let's click back on our EQ, and now let's listen to this thing. at that. It's getting big, right? You can hear that. Like it's just setting up under, just whoa, 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 whoa. So you just using my MIDI knob, I can just control it in and out of my mix. Okay, so that's pretty much using filtering, using a compressor, and using some reverb. So what about if we will just want to give this thing some more color to it? Say you got an effect or a sound, it just really ain't quite what you're wanting, and it's just needing some more color. Let's get our filters back up to where we can kind of hear this thing. So let's add, a lot of people never think about using distortion. Distortion can be a very useful tool on, say, piano tracks. It can be used on bass track. You almost want to use distortion on a bass almost every time. And pads, synth, strings, stuff like that. Don't be afraid to use distortion. So let's just load up a distortion pedal. And also, I'm just using the basics effects here, but if you have some guitar rack effects, which I think let's see. Yeah, I don't have any on here. But say if you had some guitar type effects, use them. They work really, really well. So we got some distortion. What you want to do, you want to start out, turn your drive all the way down. And that's the key, especially when you're running it on a bass track or a piano track or something like that. You barely want to use the drive any at all. You just barely crack the drive open, and then control your tone. And what's going to happen, you can push the drive just a little bit. What it starts doing, it'll start adding harmonics, natural harmonics. The filter elements will start overlaying each other and creating these modes inside the spectrum, and it'll start creating these natural harmonics, which adds lots of life and lots of color. So let's so we got our sound there. I'm not going to play with the EQ. What I'm going to do is just play with this distortion. Here, as I turn it up, how it starts adding that color. We can maybe turn the tone all the way up. If you got to, you can even, if you want to just really drive this thing. See, now it sounds distorted, and that's what we don't want. We're not trying to go for a rock and roll guitar. What we want to do is just add a few harmonics to it. So let's get our output back up here to normal, and then let's just kind of give it just a little bit of drive. Not too much, just a little bit. Now let's go back up here to our EQ, and let's play, just kind of hold some notes and play with the filters again. That distortion really, really brought this sound alive. Sorry about that. You can see how just the EQ really changes the life of your pads. And when you're running, say, a software instrument live on stage, you kind of want to use the same theory. If you're using a main stage or even Ableton or something like that, load you up an EQ, get it to where you can MIDI assign the filter cutoffs, your high pass and low pass, and load up some compression, reverb, light distortion, and then start playing with your your filtering. So that's pretty much, that right there would be all we would really need for this particular instrument we're looking for, which I'd probably start right about there, then get it to where I can control this. Maybe sweep it down just a little bit. So that's a really good starting point. Then if you need to, you can come back and add another compressor. Logic is it. Comparing Logic to Ableton Live, you almost gotta add twice or even 3 times the amount of effects to equal one compressor, equal one reverb unit in Ableton Live. Ableton Live is really, really great when it comes to their effects and compressors and reverbs. So don't be afraid to, let's just say, add another compressor on this thing. Let's just play around, see what happens. So let's got another compressor. And we'll just drag this one maybe a little bit there, and so basically what's going on is we're running a compressor in front of our effects, then running a compressor after our effects. And you can play around with the different gain structures, the different attacks. So now it kind of creates a wobble. Well, not really a wobble, but you can hear that thing morphing. Well, that's something else. Maybe try a different reverb. Delay. We haven't used delay. Let's say delay. Let's just use an echo. An echo sounds pretty basic. So, got eighth notes there. Repeat. Color. Let's turn the color up on it. Turn the dry down a little bit and turn the wet up. Eighth notes looks pretty good. Maybe do a dotted eighth notes. And let's go back to our EQ and just kind of play with the filtering again. You hear it now, it's adding it's almost adding like a let's get back on that high filter. So that's pretty much how you make a worship pad. And what I try to do is I try to keep my elements pretty simple. I'm not getting into a whole lot of automated sounds. It's just kind of a straightforward, pretty cut and dry. Let's go up. Pretty cut and dry sound. What I'll do is I'll EQ this particular one. Like right now, it sounds pretty thick. What I'll do now is just I'll kind of get it over here on this portion I need and bring this thing down. I won't let it take up the full spectrum on this particular track. I'll come like this, let's see, and get my filter set where it's more of this high end. And then what we'll do is we'll let a second some kind of synth pad layered on top of it. So for the bigger parts of the song, we'll let this part just kind of underlay up under the whole track from start to finish. And as the song goes through, I'll take and automate the EQ filter kind of just in this section here, not let it sweep all the way front to back, but just kind of in this little kind of just a small section there. That way it gives room for some other elements. And then what we'll do is we'll create a second pad track that's a little bit more synthy, maybe a little bit more pad sounding, to come in like on the bigger verses or the bigger choruses or bridge. If you kind of scroll to the chorus, Holy Spirit, you can hear the guitars doing the reverby. You can hear the guitars doing the reverby swell thing. But if you listen real close and kind of void out the guitars in your mind, you'll hear a big pad that's laying right up under the guitars that makes the guitars actually sound bigger than what they really are. This place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome. Let's turn the master track down a little bit. Turn the master track down and we'll just kind of play with our instrument.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
So right now I'm playing it. You really can't even tell. What I'm gonna do is stop the music and keep on playing it. See there? I'm still on my pad. Watch when I play the track again. So I'm still playing my MIDI keyboard here. So let's back up to the intro. You can tell the pad that we created, I mean, it just fits right in, and we just kind of, sped through it.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
So if I was going to do that, basically, if I was recording this, I would basically hold that, but I wouldn't want it to be full. So what I'd do is I'd work my filter to let it grow as it, as the song come in. And you can even octave down. Verse
2, 3, 4.
Anyways, but you kind of get the point of what I'm doing there. You can hear that pad. They just barely got it coming in. So what I would probably do is bring the volume down, and probably have to do an automation on the volume as well as automation on the filter to get it to swell just right.
Verse
I guess we could try that. Let's see. So that's kind of where I'm wanting to be at. Just a single. Right now I'm just hitting a single A note. And this track sounds a little bit too big to start out with. What I want to do is filter it down a little bit. Take some of the low end out of it. Just a little bit. That gives me some room there. Okay, so we're gonna start it right there. And I'm gonna have to bring the volume down, and I'm gonna have to start, like if we start recording, I'm basically gonna have to start playing. Then we'll come back and automate. And of course, there's other YouTube videos out there to teach you how to automate, while recording, automating this, that. What I'm gonna do is just kind of record the intro part and then just show you a quick tip on how we automate. So what I want to do, now that we have our markers up here, we're going to turn our cycle mode on and just cycle for the intro. And we're just going to work on our intro section. So let's see, just kind of zoom in on our intro. That's pretty much it. So my cycle mode is on, and we got our track armed for recording, and let's just record it and see what happens.
3, 4.
I'm just holding the A and the E. What's that? The 1 and the 5. I'm just gonna hold that. Then I'll have to come back and I'll do a quick thing on automation and just show you how we automate it.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
So there we go. We got the verse, or the intro. And if I play it back, and something else you can do, something I like to do is, especially on my MIDI tracks, since we are lined up on the grid, lined up on our click track and everything, you can click right here on the track, then come up here to quantize. And I always quantize to 1/8 notes. And now that thing is just going to be right on. So now when we play it back, it's going to fire just perfectly. And by quantizing, what I do, if you have to slice or chop this thing up, if you have your notes quantized, it really makes it easy to where you don't have a note just barely ahead or in front of the grid. Then if you slice it and chop it, you're like, oh man, something's missing. So anyways, there goes our track. So now let's show you some automation. What we're going to do is come up here to automation. Just click on it, and you can automate your volume. We'll just click on volume, and this is my volume here. So we'll just put a little point, and we'll come over here. I basically want it to be at normal volume by the time this verse hits, and 0 volume here. And of course my count, I don't want it on my count. So now when we play this back, let's just mute the master track. Now our automation, you're going to start hearing this pad slowly come in. I'm going to turn this click track down. Hear how that came in?
Verse 2, 3, 4.
There we go. Now what we're going to do, since that's a pretty smooth, slow swell there, now let's automate our filter effect. So let's click back on our track. Let's hit this little drop down button here, and let's add another automation in here. And let's click on volume, and let's come up to the channel EQ, and let's scroll down to, I believe it's our high cut. Which one is, I believe, is a frequency maybe? Yeah, I believe it's going to be our high cut frequency. So let's click on it. So now we can kind of do the same thing, add a point, and let's just scroll that back and bring this one, grab another point, and let's just bring it up to there. And now let's watch what happens. See if I grab, I believe it was the high cut frequency I needed. And here it comes.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
That sounds pretty dang close to me. Let's just unmute the track and just see how ours fits with theirs. If we open up our EQ, you'll be able to see automation most likely as it goes along. Yeah, see how the automation's coming in?
Verse 2, 3, 4.
Cool. Well, what if we wanted to, if you notice how it just stayed the high part, what if I wanted to make it as it went along, if we wanted to thicken it up? What if we wanted to do that? So let's take and do the same thing but with our low cut filter. So let's hit the drop down. Let's hit this little drop down button, And on the high cut filter, let's just come back over here to channel EQ. Instead of do high cut filter, let's do the low cut filter, low cut frequency. There it is. And now let's basically do the same thing. Add our little points, and I believe this will do it. So we got them. Let's just open it up so we can watch it. As you move along, you can see how it's going to shift it. So let's watch what it does. See how it starts out real low? Now it shifts through it.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
Cool. And that's pretty much that element. Let's just mute our track and let you listen back to the original track. I'll turn this back up. You can hear how there's a swelling in. If you listen, theirs is kind of there early on. Theirs is kind of setting there. You know, if we really want to fine tune our automation, theirs is, you can start hearing theirs right about here. So what I will do is probably come right about here, and let's just bring that volume up to say there, and give it a little bit more of a volume jump there. And let's see what that does. That might be a little bit too much, so let's just come back over here and kind of play with this a little bit. So we got a faster rise right here, and then a slow rise through the second part of it. So let's just see how that works. That fast rise, then it slows down, then the filtering automation kind of raises more of the volume on the next part. So when you do that with the track, let's go back. I'll show you on your EQ so you can see how the EQ is automating.
Verse 2, 3, 4.
Cool. And that's pretty much an idea of how automation works, to get your compressors and EQs. And you can even automate your compressor, your reverbs, your distortion, to really fine tune some of these elements, which, for building these tracks for live worship, you really don't have to get that detailed with it, because in a live setting, people's not going to notice some of that. Now, if you're building these tracks for a demo or something like that, you might want to tweak them and get them really fine tuned. But anyways, that's pretty much automation, and we can turn this automation back off so we don't see it. And what I would pretty much do is I'd go through, right now we got the intro. So now what I would do is I would cycle through the verse and move my cycle to the verse. And usually once you get, a lot of times, especially in worship music, the first verse is going to be the same as the second verse, and the third verse and the fourth verse. They're pretty much a lot of the same. Even the first chorus to the second chorus. So if you once you lay down the first verse and second verse, you can almost just copy and paste it over to your next group of verses. Same with the chorus. Once I lay down my MIDI notes for my chorus, I could just copy and paste those MIDI notes over to my second chorus. And so you can really fly through these things, building a whole track pretty quick. The main key is, work in cycle mode to get the whole track, instead of going from start to finish, from the intro to the end. When you do that, it really makes it time consuming because you'll miss notes. And but if you work from these cycle mode, it really makes it really quick. Once you kind of what I do, once you get completed with you have all your MIDI notes where you want them. Say you got from start to finish, you have all your sections complete. So you'll have a whole roll here of MIDI notes. And what I'll do, once I have this track, all the automations laid out on it, once I have it how I want it, I'll click on the track. Of course, turn the record off. Click on the track, come up here to track, and we'll click on bounce track in place. And I'll include the volume and pan automations. We don't want to bypass the effects. But what we'll do, instead of replacing the track, we'll do it as a new track and a bounce in place, and then just hit OK. Now what it's going to do, now I only put in the intro, but if, for instance, we did the whole song, it's going to bounce that whole song into place as one audio file, just like we did, up here. So now you have the MIDI portion, and now we have the audio portion. And what I'll usually do is my MIDI tracks, I'll color code them yellow. I'll color code all of them yellow, and then I'll take my actual instrument tracks and group them by different colors. Let's just say our pads, we'll just group them blue. As you can tell, this is a WAV file now, or like an audio file. It's not MIDI notes. So as we scroll through this, if we zoom in, it's kind of hard to see because it's a pad and it's just kind of subtle in the background. But if you really zoom in, you can see it's an actual audio file. It's not MIDI notes. And that's what we want for bouncing out the stems. Now, for some reason, we kept our MIDI track. So if for some reason we get along through the production and we realize, hey, this doesn't work, we need to go back. All you got to do is delete or mute out this audio track. Come back up here to your MIDI instrument and correct whatever MIDI notes you need to correct. And then once you get it how you want it for that production, or that whole, for all the sections, bounce it in place over here. And of course, what I'll do is I like organization and icons, so I'll come and pick me an icon for a pad. Let's just say that looks pretty cool. And what I'll do as I come along, I try to keep all my audio tracks down at the bottom, and I take and move all my MIDI tracks up above my click and cues. Because what I'll do is I'll mute them, turn it off and mute. So now we have our audio track here. That's basically, there's nothing on it. So it's not going to use any of our processing power. It's just mainly using space on your hard drive to store this audio file. And anytime you have a MIDI track up here, or an instrument track, instruments, they use processing power. So you're kind of limited on how many tracks you can add before you start running out of RAM. Especially on this Mac Mini, it will freeze up pretty quick. So, but when you put this thing in mute, when you mute it, basically turns off these instruments, and so it don't use your processing power. So you can start muting all your MIDI tracks after you bounce them into a audio track. And then once you get finalized with all your tracks how you want them, you'll just bounce out your audio tracks for your stems. And of course, I'm not going to walk you through how to record all your different instrument tracks. There's tons of YouTube videos out there on how to record an audio track. Basically, I wanted to show you just kind of my workflow on sound design, how to use how to use this EQ filter, how to automate it, and then once you get your MIDI track done, bouncing it to a bounce in place audio track, and kind of my workflow on that. And that's pretty much it. Pretty simple process. It may take a little bit of practice to kind of get in the swing of it, just because it is a little bit different workflow than probably what a lot of you guys are used to, but it works really, really well. Let's see if I can open up. Let's just save this, and I'll show you. I will open up a project that I've already completed where I've done this on. Let's see. Close project. Okay, here it goes. So this is what it looks like when I have a project done. Like I was saying, here goes all the instrument tracks, and you can see I recorded everything. I basically recorded each section in cycle mode, and you can see each MIDI recording. And some of the stuff is kind of repetitive. Like you see, this is actual just, instead of recording all, 16 bars or whatever, I was able to just record 4 bars and then copy and paste the 4 bars. Like I said, worship music is pretty repetitive. So, especially like on the snare drum track, I was able to just take a small portion of it, record just that small portion, then copy and paste it. So you'll get quick at building these things to where you're not just one take from start to finish. Use your cycle mode to your advantage. But here goes all the instrument tracks. You can see how I recorded them. Then directly below them, you can see all the bounce in places. If you notice, every one of these tracks is a bounce in place. I bounce in place everything. Basically there's nothing on these things other than some EQ to fine tune the track, and then buses. Buses, what I'll do is I'll bus, like if you come to our mixer, basically you got the buses and channel EQs, and what these buses are is basically, let's see, bus 1's a ambient reverb, you got a medium reverb, a large reverb, and what I'll do is I'll use these buses to blend all these tracks together, basically put them all in the same room. And what you want to do when you use buses, you want to use kind of a short reverb, a medium reverb, and a large reverb, and then use the 3 to set the mix how you want it. And that's kind of the trick to mixing. If you notice, each one of these tracks has some kind of filter, and pretty much all of them have this low pass filter to where I'm not losing a lot of power on my low end and having my speakers just jump out of the box. So that's pretty much it. Let's see here, and yeah, but that's pretty much it. I'll hit play and see everything's muted, but other than my track. So
verse 1, 2, 3, 4.
And you can see my blue tracks here. These are actually live instruments. Some of these other, let's see. I had some cymbals down here and handbells and stuff. That was live instruments as well. And some of these are actually mic'd instruments we mic'd up in the studio and actually recorded live.
Chorus 1,
like electric
2,
guitars.
3, 4.
But again, what I did is I used cycle mode. Some of these you can see, like my acoustic guitar, I kind of did a one take from verse to up to the second chorus, or up to the chorus.
1, 2,
and some
3,
of them I kind of just punched in, used cycle mode and punched in where I needed it, and there's no need to record from start to finish if the instrument ain't playing through all that. Of course, if you zoom in, you can probably see the you can see the actual wave files. If you notice, none of my tracks are just real big on the wave. You don't want to. You want to leave room for mastering on your tracks. Rich, burning these things to a loop, you're not really going to use mastering, but mainly just normalize when you bounce everything out. But and you can see all my MIDI notes on the stuff, but I'm not using my MIDI tracks. I bounced them in place. So anyways, that's kind of my workflow. And if you notice, I have way too many tracks to use. Say if we're going to use in like the Prime app or the multi-tracks app for like your iOS, I have too many tracks for that. So what I'll do is I'll group these things. I'll kind of subgroup them. Like say my drums, I will solo my drums out, then bounce them to one track. And same for like, okay, pads. I might have multiple pads or multiple synthesizers. What I'll do is I'll just group them together and bounce them as one track. There's no need to have too many multi-tracks if you don't really have to. I mean, some people want the full control, but on some little things, you really don't have to have that much control, and you can just kind of bus group some of this stuff. But anyways, that is pretty much it. Kind of show you how I save when I bounce these things out, how I save them. If I come to my bounce folder, well, that's just my test track. Let's see. Where did I save them at? Maybe over here. Nope. Loop community songs. There they go. Shores, audio files. Here they go. These are the actual files I bounced. I bounced the acoustic guitar, the click track, the cue track, cymbals, drums, electric guitar 1, 2, and 3, handbells, hats, pad 1, pad 2, piano, swell effects, synth 1, synth bass, 2 bells, and white bells. So, and that pretty much fills up, anything I need inside the Prime app for Loop Community. But that's kind of how I bounced it. When I bounced this stuff out, I would just solo the tracks that I wanted in these groups. And I normalized them. When I bounce them out, I do normalize and then bounce it out in either MP3 or Wave, whatever you're wanting to use. Wave files, if you notice all these are in Wave, you're going to have a better quality bouncing out in Wave. But anyways, that's pretty much it, my workflow. And I hope you enjoyed this thing. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, even on SoundCloud. A few little projects out there. But anyways, guys, enjoy and hope you learned something.